When the HOA president said, "We've handled your yacht issue," I didn't understand. Not at first. Her voice wasn't triumphant. It wasn't angry. It was worse, controlled, measured. The calmness of someone who believes they've finally won. I stood there with the phone pressed against my ear, listening to nothing but the soft click of her ending the call. A chill ran through me, the kind that doesn't start on your skin, but somewhere deeper, somewhere in your chest. The marina air smelled like sea salt and warm diesel, but suddenly it felt colder, heavier, like the world had tilted by an inch, and only I noticed. My fingers tightened around the phone. Handled. Handled how? I drove to the marina, fast, faster than I usually allow myself. The road curved along the water, ocean winds slapping against my truck as if trying to push me back, as if trying to warn me of what waited ahead. I didn't listen. The moment I stepped out onto the gravel lot, something felt wrong. Marinas are never quiet. There are always footsteps, tools clinking, engines humming, water slapping at hulls, gulls screaming like the world is ending. Noise is part of the rhythm of the place. But that morning, nothing. Just the faint groan of wood shifting under its own weight, and the soft hiss of wind passing through the masts. I walked onto the dock. One slow step, then another. Boards creaking under my shoes, echoing louder than they should, and then halfway down the pier the smell hit me. Burned fiberglass, shredded cedar, wet dust, and diesel smoke still lingering in the air. My stomach twisted. No. But when I turned my head, when my eyes finally landed on the empty slip, everything inside me dropped. My yacht, my father's yacht, was gone. Not moved, not relocated, not towed, gone. In its place, floating on the silent water, was a field of splintered debris. Long shards of wood, twisted metal, and white fiberglass chunks bobbing like the remains of a shipwreck from another century. And behind it, near the rocks, lay the largest piece left, part of the stern, cracked open like a broken rib cage. I felt my breath catch. Not in my throat, deeper, somewhere grief sits before it becomes real. For a moment, I didn't move. The world narrowed down to water, broken wood, and the beating of my own heart. It didn't even feel like anger yet. Just a hollow quiet. I don't know how long I stood there before the first emotion hit me. A cold, sharp pressure behind my ribs. Not rage, not shock, recognition. The HOA did this, and they thought they had every right to. They thought they had finally put me in my place. They thought they had taught me a lesson I wouldn't forget. But they forgot one thing. I owned the entire marina. Every dock. Every slip. Every inch of shoreline beneath their expensive waterfront homes, and they just destroyed property that didn't belong to them. I didn't know it then, standing at the edge of those floating ruins. But this was the moment everything changed. Those splinters were the start of a war, one I never wanted, but one I would finish. The thing is, this moment didn't come out of nowhere. It started weeks before. Small things. Things I brushed off because I thought the HOA was just being the HOA, nosy, controlling, annoying. But ultimately harmless. I was wrong. The first sign came in the form of a bright, yellow notice taped to my truck windshield. Your vessel does not meet HOA's visual compliance standards. I laughed. Actually laughed. The yacht was a classic. A beautifully restored 52-foot craftsman-style boat my father spent half his life repairing. There was nothing non-compliant about it. More importantly, the HOA had no authority over my marina. I tossed the notice aside. Annoying? Sure, but nothing more. Then came the second letter. The third? The 10th, each one written with the confidence of people who believed I owed them something. Then came the fees. Dock appearance fee, $200. Maritime. Structure fee, $350. View preservation fee, $400. Stared at each one in disbelief. The marina wasn't part of their HOA map. Their rules ended 200 feet before my property line, but they didn't care at first. I thought it was just a paperwork mistake, so I ignored them. That was my mistake, because people who thrive on control don't tolerate being ignored. One afternoon, while I was sitting on the deck of my yacht tightening a railing fixture, I heard the distinct clack of heels on the dock. They were sharp, deliberate, dangerously confident. I turned. There she was, the HOA president, hair pinned back so tight it stretched her face, a folder tucked under her arm, sunglasses reflecting the water like mirrors. "Are you the owner?" she asked. No greeting, no introduction, just ownership, control. I nodded slowly. "Yes." "Good," she said, stepping closer. "You're behind on your dues." I blinked. "What dues?" "The HOA fees for this vessel." Stared at her for a long second, genuinely trying to understand whether she was joking or delusional. "This marina isn't part of the HOA," I finally said. She gave a very small smile, the kind designed to tell you she knew better. "Oh, it is now." My jaw tightened. "No, it isn't. You don't own this property." "I do." She tilted her head. "That's not what our records show." Her confidence rattled me for just a moment. Not because she was right. She wasn't. But because her certainty didn't feel like arrogance. It felt like intention. I shook my head. "I'll handle it. Goodbye." And I turned away. That's when she said it, softly, almost like a warning wrapped in politeness. "If you ignore us, it won't go well." I remember pausing, feeling something coil inside my chest. I should have confronted her right then. Should have grabbed the deed from my office and shoved it in her face. Should have told her to stay off my property, but I didn't. And she took it as weakness. The following week, everything escalated. New faces started appearing around the docks. Men with clipboards taking measurements. Neighbors photographing my yacht from multiple angles. A white SUV idling across the lot for 20 minutes at a time. One day, I caught a man kneeling beside my hull, holding a tape measure. He jumped when I approached. "Oh, HOA inspection," he blurted out, stuffing papers back into a folder. "Inspection of what?" I asked. He didn't answer, just hurried away, dropping a sheet behind him. I picked it up, a checklist labeled Pre-Removal Assessment. My blood ran cold. Removal. Removal of what? Of my yacht? I felt the first real spark of fear. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that sits in your stomach like a stone. I marched straight to the HOA office the next morning, inside. The president sat behind a desk stacked with forms. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she looked prepared. "What is this?" I demanded, tossing the paper onto her desk. She glanced at it. "Oh, that, yes. The board voted unanimously. Your vessel violates multiple community codes." No. I felt my voice drop to a dangerous calm. "There are no community codes here. This is private property." She folded her hands. "We'll see about that." That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a takeover attempt. They wanted control of my marina, of the shoreline, of my father's legacy. And they were willing to lie, forge records, and manipulate paperwork to do it. But even then, I didn't think they'd go this far. I didn't think they'd actually act on it. I truly didn't believe they were capable of something so violent, so invasive, so destructive. But that was before the morning. I walked onto the dock and saw the remains of my father's yacht, scattered like bones. Before I saw what the HOA had done, before I realized they had crossed a line they could never come back from, and before they discovered the one truth that would decide everything. They hadn't just destroyed a yacht. They had destroyed my property. Property I legally owned. Property they had no jurisdiction over. Property they were about to lose everything for. And while they believed they had finally won, they were wrong. Dead wrong. The night after the confrontation, I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. The sound of their laughter kept looping in my head, the smugness in their voices, the way they looked at me like I was trespassing on my own bloodline. I kept replaying it. The moment I warned them, the moment they ignored me. The moment they turned my family's island into a blueprint they could trample for. Profit. I sat on the porch of my father's old cabin, the one place they hadn't touched yet, and watched their construction lights flicker across the lake. They worked through the night, their hammers echoing like a countdown. Every strike of metal into wood felt like another disrespect they'd carved into my father's memory. And still, I let them, because part of me needed them to finish. Part of me needed them to feel so confident, so untouchably right, that when the truth hit, it wouldn't just shake them, it would dismantle the foundation they thought they were standing on. But even knowing that, something hurt. Something burned. Watching the land my father protected with his life be treated like an abandoned playground made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't shake. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm down there and tear every cabin down with my bare hands. But I remembered what my father always said: never fight someone who expects a fight. Let the truth do the swinging. And tonight, the truth felt like the only weapon I had left. I stood, paced the porch, and stared across the dark lake as the reflection of their half-built cabins shimmered in the water. That water, that lake, belonged to my family long before their HOA even existed. My grandfather fished here as a boy. My father proposed to my mother on the North Ridge. I learned to swim here before I could walk, and now strangers were carving it up like a cake they didn't bake. For a moment, anger and heartbreak tangled inside me. I almost caved. I almost drove down there. But something else stopped. Me, something quiet, something unexpected. A memory. My father's last week alive. His hand shaking as he handed me the deed. His voice worn, soft, serious. Don't let this lake be broken by loud people who never learned to listen. He knew. He always knew. So I stayed on the porch, gripping the railing until my knuckles went white, letting the anger settle into something sharper, cleaner, something I could use. If they wanted a spectacle, I would give them silence. If they wanted confrontation, I'd give them calm. If they wanted to break me, they'd find out just how much this lake built me, just when I thought the night couldn't get any louder. I heard footsteps approaching from the woods behind the cabin. My muscles tightened. For a second, I thought it was another HOA stunt, some inspection, some fabricated violation, some attempt to intimidate, but it wasn't. It was Emma. She stepped into the porch light, cheeks red from the cold, breath shaky like she'd run the whole way. Emma wasn't part of the HOA board. She hated their arrogance as much as I did. She grew up 2 houses down the lake as a kid, long before the HOA arrived and turned neighborly living into a dictatorship. And unlike the others, she remembered who my father was. She remembered what this lake used to feel like before the meetings, the fines, the rules. You heard them, didn't you? She asked softly, stepping closer. I nodded, swallowing down the heat rising in my throat. They're not stopping, she whispered. They're building even faster now. They think you're bluffing. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was bitter, tired. They think I'm nobody. She looked at me with something between sympathy and fear. They're planning to rent out the first cabins by next month. Luxury packages. Lakeview suites. They even put out a newsletter to the community, bragging about the expansion. That made something inside me crack. My father's land, I muttered. They're charging people to stay on my father's land.
House.
She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence between us was enough. Then she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and turned the screen toward me. They posted this an hour ago. It was a photo of one of the cabins. Half-built, standing right over the old tree line where my father carved our initials when I was 10. In the caption, the HOA president wrote, "New investment opportunity. Our property is expanding beautifully. Stay tuned for the grand opening." Our property. That was it. That crossed the line. That shattered the last thread of patience I had left. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just breathed slowly, deeply, until the anger steadied into something cold enough to hold. Emma watched my face shift and whispered, "What are you going to do?" What was I going to do? Nothing reckless, nothing loud, nothing they could twist against me, but something they would never forget. I walked inside the cabin, rummaged through my father's old desk, and found the leather portfolio he kept hidden away, the one he told me only to use when the lake is in real danger. Inside was the deed, the original map, the boundary documents, the notarized letters, the federal waterway exemptions, everything. My father didn't just own the island. He owned the shoreline, the docks, the submerged land, the legal access point, the entire lake bed. The HOA didn't just build on my island. They built on a protected inheritance carved into state, decades before their association even existed. I closed the portfolio carefully, as if it were made of glass, and looked at Emma. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow, everything changes." She nodded, but worry flickered in her eyes. "They won't take this well. They don't have to. What if they retaliate? They already did." She swallowed hard and looked away, knowing I was right. Then, without warning, her voice cracked with emotion. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry they're doing this to you. Your father. He would hate what they've turned this place into." I felt the sting behind my eyes before I could stop it. I looked away so she wouldn't see, but she always did. "Then help me make it right," I said softly. She nodded once, firm, committed, and just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. The sun was barely rising the next morning when we walked down to the lake. Fog rolled across the surface like a living thing, wrapping around the cabins and swallowing the noise from the construction site. The workers were already there, hammering, sawing, laughing. None of them noticed us at first. None of them cared. Not until the HOA president stepped out from behind one of the cabins and froze at the sight of us. Her smile faded instantly. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, annoyance dripping from every word. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence do what my voice didn't need to. Finally I said, "Watching you finish." She scoffed. "You think you're intimidating someone? This is HOA property. We've been over this." I looked her straight in the eyes. Calm, steady, unshakable. "You've been building on land that isn't yours," said quietly. "And today, you're going to find out exactly who it belongs to." Her expression tightened, but she didn't break. She still thought she was in control. "Unless you're planning to stop us," she said, folding her arms. "I have work to do." I stepped aside, letting her walk past me. And the moment she brushed my shoulder, she whispered, barely audible, but sharp enough to cut, "You can't win." Didn't look at her. I didn't react. I simply said, "Watch till the end." She paused. Just long enough for doubt to flicker in her eyes, but she walked away, pretending it didn't bother her. Emma stood next to me, voice low. "They really have no idea what's coming." "No," I said. "But they will, because today wasn't about fighting. Today was about preparing. Copies, witnesses, documentation, everything. Needed to end this with a single stroke, but before the final moment before, the reveal that would shake this community to its core, there was one thing I needed to do. Something personal, something painful, something that mattered. I walked to the tree line where my father carved our initials, and touched the fresh cut where the HOA had shaved the bark off to make room for their cabins. The wound in the tree felt like a wound in me. "I'm not letting them erase you," I whispered. "Not now. Not ever." Behind me, the construction noise got louder. They were so confident, so proud, so oblivious. Good, let them be, because the truth was coming. The kind of truth that doesn't knock politely. It kicks the whole door down, and when it hits, I want them watching. Eyes wide, mouths open, realizing too late who they underestimated. If you're still watching this right now, don't blink. The next part is where everything they built, every cabin, every lie, every smug laugh comes crashing down. Stay with me till the end. And also tell me from where you are watching. The morning air felt too calm for what was coming. Almost unnatural. Like the lake itself was holding its breath. Waiting to see whether justice would finally return to a shoreline that had forgotten how to recognize it. I stood there with the leather portfolio in my hand, the weight of generations pressing into my palm. The fog was beginning to thin, rising like a curtain revealing the stage where all of this, every lie, every threat, every smug smile would finally collide with the truth. The workers didn't notice me at first. They were too busy dragging lumber, shouting instructions, drilling into the skeletons of cabins that should have never been built. If they knew they were hammering nails into a legal coffin, none of them showed it. Then one of them looked up, just one guy with tired eyes and a reflective vest, and froze when he saw me standing by the shoreline. He nudged the man beside him, who nudged someone else, until a ripple of silence spread across the site like someone had pressed mute on the whole. Morning. Then she walked out. The HOA president still, dressed like she was heading into a board meeting rather than a construction zone, perfect hair, expensive coat, clipboard tucked against her side like a shield. Her eyes locked onto mine with irritation, confusion, and the tiniest flicker of fear she thought she hid well. "You're back," she said, though she clearly hoped I wouldn't be. "You're almost done building," I replied, scanning the nearly finished cabins behind her. Good, that word good threw her off. She expected anger, yelling, threats. Not calm, not quiet confidence. Quiet scares people like her more than shouting ever could. She narrowed her eyes. "Why are you here?" "To watch," I said. "You told me yesterday to leave." "So I did. I left you alone too." "Expand." The workers seemed confused. The board members gathered behind her looked uneasy, glancing at each other like they were missing a punchline. She crossed her arms. "If you think showing up again will change anything, it won't. We have permits, community votes, funding, and none of that," I said gently, "gives you ownership." Something in her expression twitched just slightly, but enough to tell me she noticed the portfolio in my hand. "You still holding that old folder?" she asked with an amused smirk. "Let me guess, more proof of your fantasy property rights." "It's not fantasy," I said. "It's lineage." Her face hardened, but before she could speak, tires crunched on gravel behind us. A black SUV rolled up the narrow road, followed by a second. People stepped out wearing khaki vests, carrying survey equipment, cameras, and clipboards. Federal waterway officials, environmental land surveyors, property boundary assessors. Every one of them had been contacted quietly, scheduled discreetly, and called to the lake without the HOA knowing a thing. Her face went pale. "This is a restricted site," she snapped. "You can't just bring their here for me," I said softly, "and for the lake." The officials approached, with calm authority, already scanning the cabins, the shoreline, the disturbed land, the illegally uprooted tree line. They didn't need instructions. They saw enough damage to understand. The HOA president tried to regain control. She pushed past one of the officials, shouting about permissions, property rights, community development. One of them turned to her and said in a voice so steady it sliced through the entire construction site, "Ma'am, we're here due to a filed ownership claim predating your HOA by nearly 3 decades. We will be conducting an immediate assessment." The silence that followed felt like gravity pressing down on every board member behind her. She recovered quickly. "Too quickly? That's impossible. The HOA owns this land." It was transferred by her voice cut off when another official opened the map inside my portfolio, the original, state-stamped. Notarized survey lines showing the lake, the island, the shoreline, all shaded under one name. My father's. Her lips parted but no sound came out. A board member grabbed her arm. "Wait, is this real?" He whispered harshly. "It's outdated," she spit back. "It's filed with the registry," the assessor corrected calmly, "and actively maintained. Whoever owns the rights here has full legal authority over construction on this land." For the first time since this began, she stumbled back, not physically, emotionally. The workers stepped away from the cabins. Board members whispered in panic. A few residents had gathered at the road, watching with wide eyes, phones recording, None of them were laughing now. I didn't speak. Not yet. I let the truth settle like a slow-moving landslide. The officials walked the perimeter, taking photos, measuring, documenting. One of them stopped beside the cabin built over the carved tree line and ran his hand over the fresh cut on the trunk. Who authorized removal of the shoreline markers? He asked sharply. The HOA president opened her mouth, but nothing came out. These boundaries, man continued, were legally protected. A board member whispered, "We're screwed." Another said, "You told us we owned this." Another added, "You said he was lying." Her voice finally escaped in a desperate shout. "He is lying." Every head turned. She pointed at me like a villain in a courtroom drama unraveling at the end. He made all this up. He's manipulating, he's staging, this is all staged. Her voice echoed across the lake, bright and brittle. But the official holding my father's deed didn't flinch, ma'am, he said evenly. This documentation is authentic, verified, filed, and unbroken. This entire lake shoreline, island, submerged land belongs to him, legally, fully. He turned toward me with a respectful nod. The construction will cease immediately. Effective now? And there it was. The moment everything shifted. The HOA president's clipboard slipped from her hands and hit the dirt. One of the board members walked away from her like he couldn't stand beside the sinking ship anymore. Another cursed under his breath and kicked at a loose board. The workers lowered their tools. Some looked frustrated, but most looked relieved, like they had sensed something was off the whole time. Emma stepped beside me. She didn't speak, but the way her hand brushed mine said everything. Then, finally, I walked forward, not angry, not vengeful, just steady. For months, I said, you've threatened me, harassed me, humiliated me, all while building on land you never bothered to research properly, all while ignoring every warning I gave you. The HOA president's eyes glistened, not with guilt, but with panic. You laughed at me, I continued, mocked my father's legacy, treated this lake like a blank check, but it was never yours. I stepped closer until she had no choice but to meet my eyes. You built your empire on someone else's foundation, and now you're watching it collapse. Her voice trembled. You can't do this. I didn't do anything, I said quietly. You did. The officials signaled to the workers to clear the area. Some began packing tools. Others walked toward their trucks. The entire construction zone dissolved around her. She looked so small now, so powerless, so exposed, and I wasn't done. Everyone who's been watching this, I said, turning toward the onlookers, the cameras, the phones recording every second. Keep watching. My voice deepened. There's more coming. And you'll want to see how this ends, because everything they built was about to be undone, piece by piece. The cabins, the fines, the threats, the lies, the power they thought they had. All of it. If you're here right now, don't go anywhere. What happens next is where the real reckoning begins. The sun was high now, reflecting off the lake like it was trying to blind the chaos around us. Every cabin the HOA had built loomed like a monument to their arrogance. The weight of reality had already begun to bend those walls. I watched the workers pack up tools, the board members arguing quietly among themselves. Faces pale and tight with worry, I stepped onto the dock where my father's yacht used to float. Running my hand along the splintered remains, the fragments still bobbed slightly in the water, each piece a silent accusation of what had been done. I didn't feel anger, not the kind that screams or shakes, but a cold satisfaction, because now they were about to see consequences the way I had, clear, undeniable, and irreversible. Emma stood beside me, her eyes tracing the perimeter of the lake. Are you really going to take it all back? She asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. I looked at her, calm, steady. We're not taking it back. We're reclaiming it. What they think they've earned. They don't even own. The HOA president tried to intervene again, waving her hands as if that could stop the tide. This isn't fair. You can't just... I cut her off with a gesture toward the officials. Do you hear that? It's the sound of legality. It's the sound of truth. And it's louder than any complaint you've ever filed. She flinched. For the first time, she looked small, exposed, vulnerable. Her board members glanced at each other, the whispers growing. They were beginning to understand that every move they had made, every fine, every illegal construction, every manipulation was about to unravel in front of the whole community. The officials walked methodically through the site, documenting each cabin, each violation, each section of land that had been disturbed. Every measurement, every photo, every note solidified my claim. I didn't need to speak. The proof did it for me, and then finally, the quiet moment came. The one I had been waiting for. I walked along the dock, surveying the remains of the yacht and the new constructions. I could hear my father's voice in my head, calm, instructive, guiding. Don't shout. Let the facts do the talking. And remember, always keep your composure. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and then deliberately, I raised my voice so everyone on the shore could hear. You built on my land. You demolished what was mine. You ignored the law, and you thought you could do it without consequences. Every head turned. Some people pulled out phones. Others just stared, unable to believe what they were hearing. But here's the thing, continued, letting the words settle like heavy stones. This land, these docks, Escalation, belongs to me. Fully, completely, legally, and every action you've taken here is invalid. Escalation's lips trembled. I could see the panic creeping into her posture. The sudden realization that all her plans, all her authority, had just evaporated. One of the officials stepped forward, holding a camera to document the final inspection. You will cease all construction immediately. Any further work without the landowner's permission is a violation and will be prosecuted. Her voice rose, a desperate cry. You can't just... You already did, I said quietly, looking her in the eye. You crossed every line you could. And now you're about to see exactly what happens when you underestimate someone who protects what's theirs. The workers packed up, still uneasy, but not resistant. They had no allegiance to the HOA beyond their paycheck. As they left, the quiet of the lake returned slowly, like it was inhaling after holding its breath for months. I stepped closer to what remained of the yacht, running my hand over the splintered wood. The smell of burned fiberglass still lingered, but it no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a warning when the HOA would remember forever. Emma walked beside me. So, what now? She asked. I smiled faintly. Now, we restore, slowly, carefully, legally. This lake belongs to my family, and it always will. The HOA president tried one last time, calling out to the board, attempting to salvage something, but it was too late. Every resident who had been watching from their windows, their balconies, their boats, could see the change. The confidence in her voice was gone, replaced with that unmistakable fear of someone who knows the game has ended. And then came the final quiet moment. What I call the victory without a single word? I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply walked the docks, letting the officials document everything. Letting the HOA board witness the truth in silence. The lake reflected the morning sun, shimmering off the water as if celebrating the reclamation. I could almost feel my father's presence there, smiling quietly, satisfied that justice had finally been served. I turned to Emma, letting her see the calm on my face. Sometimes I said softly, the loudest victory is the one you don't announce. She nodded, understanding. We didn't need applause. The truth had spoken louder than any words, and as the HOA president and her board were left standing there, stripped of their authority and confronted with undeniable evidence, the lesson was clear. The lake, the docks, the land, it was never theirs to control. It was never theirs to take, and they would never forget that. I looked across the water one last time, breathing in the smell of salt and wood and sunlight. I thought about the months of tension, the threats, the harassment, the destruction of something priceless, and I asked myself quietly, a rhetorical question just for me, would I have done anything differently? The answer was simple. No. Every moment led to this exact one. Every act of patience, every refusal to fight recklessly, Every silent preparation, it all led to reclaiming what was ours without destroying ourselves. Emma squeezed my hand gently. "Do you think they understand?" she asked. "They will," I said. "In time, everyone will." I knew they would. Every neighbor watching, every board member, every resident who had seen the arrogance crumble, they would remember this day. I took a deep breath. Letting the lake fill my lungs, the wind carry away the last remnants of anger. My father's legacy was intact. The marina, the shoreline, the docks, the waters, they were ours. I looked at Emma one last time. If you've ever stood up to something unfair, if you've ever fought for what's right, hold on to that courage. Protect it. Nurture it. And never let anyone take what you've earned. Her eyes glistened. Mine too, just slightly. The emotional weight of the day pressed down on us, but it was a relief, a closure, a victory. I turned to face the horizon, the sun glinting off the water. Knowing this story wasn't just about land or yachts or HOA rules, it was about resilience, about holding firm when the world expects you to fold. And as I looked out over the calm, shimmering lake, I whispered softly, almost to myself, almost to my father, almost to anyone watching, this is ours. Always has been. Always will be. If you've ever fought for something you loved, if you've ever been told you couldn't, that it wasn't yours, that it was impossible, remember this. Stand your ground. Protect what matters. And when the time comes, let the truth speak louder than their arrogance ever could. Because sometimes the quietest, most deliberate actions deliver the most unforgettable justice. And now, the lake is calm again, but the memory of this day will ripple across it forever.